The biggest job we won was an M&S job, and that was, I think, over an 18 months period, was 10.3 million quid. I just said, I can't do this anymore. I can't speak to these corporates like this anymore. I bought a little 1971 ice cream van from a woman in, I think up near Keighley, and it was called Sunshine Scoops. And we decided, let's get in the supermarkets, which we then very quickly realized is not the route, because it's hugely tough. 500 grand for the first 2-3 years a year. We're now, I think this year we'll do 10 million, 8 to 10 million. I think we're probably more in the 10 million. I had a very difficult conversation with the individual investors to say, basically, I don't think this is the right, they were keen to invest more, and I said, I don't think that's the right answer.
This is the Leeds Business Podcast, and I'm your host, Phil Fraser. Before we start, I have one simple request of you. Please hit the follow or subscribe button on the app that you're listening on. Today's guest is Dirk Mischendahl, MD of Northern Bloc Ice Creams. Dirk tells us how his first business went from nightclub events to huge corporate events, how a 1970s ice cream van led to the launch of a premium ice cream brand, and the devastation that COVID caused on his business. Let's get into what is a fascinating interview. On today's Leeds Business Podcast, we have Dirk Mischendahl, MD of Northern Bloc. Good morning.
Good morning. How are you?
I'm good. Now, we're going to talk all about ice cream, but fantastic. Unfortunately, we haven't got any samples we can give listeners, but hey, that's the magic of podcasting. But before we do that, let's go all the way back to leaving university. So you left university and set up a company straight away. How did that happen?
It was just literally, it was one of those moments where you'd enjoyed university life too much and thought, I'd love to do this for a living. And I thought, we used to go, it was great in the 90s, no phones and people could go clubbing and there would be no evidence. And I just thought that would be a fantastic thing to do, to stage these events. And that's how it happened. So from there on, I left university, and the first event I sort of tackled was the university graduation ball, which was a 4,000 capacity student event.
Wow. This is at Leeds Uni, isn't it?
Yeah, University of Leeds. Yeah.
Okay. So, that's quite a big first step. Most people go, you had 20, 30 people in a little club at, the bottom of town or something. How did you get that gig? That's quite a big step from zero to that.
In hindsight, I don't think you'd do it now, because the actual event itself, if I would look back at it now with having had 20 years experience in the event world, it was the most dangerous event. Well, there's another event, but we can talk about that. But it was a pretty dangerous event. There was no health and safety. There was no fire. I forgot the site cleaning afterwards. So I think I did an 18-hour or 20-hour straight session, which ended up me litter picking at the end because the guy wanted to put his tent down. But it was just largely because there was an organization called RAG, which is a charity in the university. And I said I'd help out. And I think I just convinced them that I could do this.
Right.
And, it was a steep learning curve, but it was fantastic. And it wasn't just me on my own. There was a chap called Attila who did all the lighting design, and he's now based out of New York and things like that. And he's like hugely, successful. There's a lot of people involved. And there was a lot of good people involved with it. It wasn't just me, but we all just mucked in and did it. It was amazing. Did that for 8 years. It was our founding event, and continued to be an event that we did for many years.
So you obviously did, despite all the health and safety and the danger, you did okay. So I assume that then gave you a launch pad for other events.
Absolutely.
What other events did you get involved in the early days?
Well, ironically, that was the core event, and then we had to sort of earn some money somehow as we were building, because like with any small business, you do the peaks and troughs, don't you? So at the trough period, you're sort of desperate for work. So at the time, there's a chap called Peter Hayward, who was my business partner, who was ex-Leeds City Council, and he was involved with, or friendly with, the Town and Country Club, and the owner of that at the time. And then we were touring a 70s stage show in the evenings, which was a spin-off from Love Train with British Gold. And that then, we did that in Birmingham, Blackburn, and in Sheffield. and Hull. So that was the evenings, and then during the day we were generating work. So that was where we got our first learnings, and then slowly and surely we got. I think the big opportunity came when we won a project with Asda.
Wow. Okay, tell us about your Asda project.
It was actually a result of someone letting Asda down, and we got the call and said, "Could you help us?" And again, we used the university facilities to. Someone had let down Asda with a venue. Asda had a refectory which had 1,800 capacity, and it was empty at the time, and we suggested using that, and they agreed, and we got them out of trouble with it. And I remember at the time there was I think Alan Layton was just the CEO just for recently, with Archie Norman being the chair and all that. And I remember this guy, I had no idea, it was our first corporate event, and I had no idea who he was. And he was walking behind the bar, and I asked him, I said, sorry, sir, you can't go behind the bar. And he looked at me with disdain and basically said, I paid for it all. And then I had to ask who that was, and it was Alan Layton. So I thought, great, well done, Dirk. But yeah, it was our first event, and that sort of led them to sort of trusting us a little bit more, and surely, bit by bit we grew that business, and sort of moved away from the dance music industry, because we produced prior to that, from 95 to 2000, primarily it was dance music: God's Kitchens, Gatecrasher, Ministry of Sound. We produced the Love Parade, which the police to this day hate me for, which was 300,000 people on Roundhay Park, unsupervised and unmanageable, and had a life on its own. And then we slowly moved away from that, because that industry is a tough industry, and it was never going to get easier, and the type of people that are involved in it. And we moved to the corporate, and Asda sort of was the building block of our corporate work, which led to sort of doing work for Marks and Spencer, Unilever, Asda, Lloyd's Banking Group, the list goes on. And that was a fantastic business, fantastic people. We had a great time building that. And that led us, then in 2014, I'd had enough, really. But that was an amazing business. You look at all the people that you'd employed, and when I left there, they gave me a little list of all the people, and it was 600 people had worked there over the years. And if you look at them where they are now, they're all in really good spots. Some really sort of amazing people have done so well. So I'm very privileged to have worked with them, and I owe them the success of that business. Great people make great companies.
Okay, let's look at this on two different sides. A, what were your main learnings from growing the business from nothing to that size? And B, why do you think people enjoyed it so much and developed so much and went on to such great things?
I mean, I'm not taking credit for them going on to great things, but I think, and it's an interesting thing around, be careful what you wish for. And I think you start off an idea, and I as I said, I left university in 95 thinking it'd be great. I was really into the dance music scene, probably overindulged in it quite a lot, and that was what I wanted to do. So we did it, and we did it for the the biggest names in the world. Ministry of Sound, God's Kitchen, Gatecrasher. There wasn't anything bigger at that time. They led the sort of thing, and you continue to build that, and the lesson, I suppose, the lessons that the bigger you grow, the more complicated, the further you get away from doing what you really do enjoy. So, I mean, that's the biggest learning I think I got from it, and I think it's also why you're doing it. There's many questions for me now are also around, why am I doing it? What's the benefit? What is this, just a vanity piece, or is it genuinely the big question? When is enough? I think, from a cultural point of view in the business, culture for me is ultimately, equally as important as sales. So people put a lot of emphasis on sales and this idea that, we've got to drive the sales, and sales is everything, and get out there. But, you need your people. You need those people to be really invested in and absolutely passionate about what they're doing. And therefore, the culture that you create in a business has to be led by leaders, not just by token, heads of or CEOs or MDs or whatever you want to call them. But you have to lead from the front. So never did I ask anyone to do anything that I wouldn't do myself. And then you need to empower them and give them the opportunity to grow. We had some amazing people that had so much responsibility at such a young age, and it was because they showed that they wanted it, they enjoyed it, and the biggest job we won was an M&S job, and that was, I think, over an 18-month period, it was 10.3 million quid, and it was taking 68,000 M&S colleagues through a training course around, in 4 different locations around the country, and it was a mammoth job. But it was fun. I mean, we did some amazing stuff during 2012. There was the Olympic stuff in Hyde Park for BT. I mean, they spent some money there it was exciting. It was new. We were running on amazing technology that was, we could afford to buy the best. And that's where it all comes down to. It's easy doing events when you've got a budget and you've got access to the people. And if you've got great people, then the whole world just changes for you.
I talk to a lot of people on the podcast about culture, and a lot of people talk about business culture, and it's one of the things I try to do with my business. Do you agree that giving people responsibility, you as the leader also have to allow them to make mistakes, and
absolutely
allow them to make mistakes in a culture that isn't going to tell them off, to use a simple phrase, for getting things wrong?
I think I have a very simple approach to mistakes. You can make 1,000 mistakes in a day, absolutely, as long as it's not the same one.
Yep.
That's, for me, making mistakes is it's called learning, and you have to accept that but I think if you allow people time and you support them enough, then I think you can, there's less mistakes, isn't there?
Yeah.
And I think that's the reality of it.
Yeah. And I think the other side of it is, if you allow people to make mistakes, they are more inclined to push the boundaries.
Yes.
That then develops the business and the opportunities and the delivery and all that sort of stuff. Without
being too specific, that's the struggle I'm having at the moment. We're part of a very big organization, and this is what happens. The bigger you get, the more policy and bureaucracy gets involved, and people then get frightened. And I did a team day sort of with Logistik, and I did some stats, and I think I found that we did something. I mean, I can't remember the number, but it was something like 90,000 emails internally in a 3-month period. And, we weren't doing that. We were emailing people next to each other. And the reason they're doing that is that they're covering themselves, and this, because they're afraid. And I was always constantly about, take the smart risk. That was one of our values. You have to take risks, but take the smart risk. Think it through. The whole idea of these cliches, they're actually so accurate, aren't they? To sort of measure twice, cut once. Take a smart risk. Calculated risking is how things progress. Don't do willy-nilly. I mean, I shoot from the hip at times, and it hasn't ended well a lot of the time. And you learn very quickly that just spending a little bit more time thinking about something helps.
Yeah. Okay, let's step forward. You've alluded to it. Was it 2014 you exited?
Yep, 2014.
Talk me through that. Was that by choice? Was that out of the blue? How did it develop?
Well, I mean, the sort of the morbid side of it is I had a bit of a breakdown moment where I couldn't quite. The pressure was always so high, and what tipped it off, I remember being in an event and doing a debrief on an event, and the client, although they got 97% satisfaction from the colleagues, 5,000 colleagues, I got told that they were disappointed at the during the prep sessions that was going on. The telephone system, the voice system, the old systems that you used to do, had an echo in it. And I just thought to myself, really, are we genuinely having this conversation? I was hauled in to talk about it, and it was almost like someone was making a point about their job, and I just got fed up with it. I just said, I can't do this anymore. I can't speak to these corporates like this anymore, because some of the stuff is just like, we are in a world where people are dying for various reasons, and there's famines and all sorts of climate change, and then we're worried about conferencing system being a bit echoey, or a microphone making a little pop or something like that. And you just think, let's get it into perspective here. So I decided to leave. And the original idea was I bought a little 1971 ice cream van from a woman in, I think up near Keighley, and it was called Sunshine Scoops. Beautiful little van. We still got it. And what I wanted to do is basically chill out, take a beat, and sit in festivals and sell someone else's ice cream. That didn't quite work out that way. I met a chef who was fantastic at coming up with some ideas. He was a great flavor, he had great flavor thoughts, a guy called Josh Whitehead. And I think he was on the Great British Chef stuff. And he was fantastic, really good. And then that made me think, well, we could do this. And this is, again, why was I doing this? I've just built a business to 20 million. We were doing 2 million EBITDA. It was a fantastic, I sold it. I could have just done nothing. So then I started, the idea, the thoughts of this, idea where, well, we could do this and we can make it. Surely that's easy enough, we'll get involved. It just built. And then I got Josh involved, who's one of the co-founders, who's my co-founder of Northern Bloc. I've known him since he was 4 years old. He was a big foodie. We basically believed our own bullshit, for the want of a better word. Thought we could do this. We started making the ice creams ourselves, in a unit, in Armley, where I'm still based. I'm here now. And we made it. We were foraging the sorrel at night, and then making it, and then selling it in food festivals and stuff. It was going really well. It was a very romantic sort of proposition. It was fun. We were doing really interesting food flavors. Hazelnut and tonka bean, raspberry sorrel, chocolate sea salt. The idea of making ice cream center plate, rather than secondary dessert that you dust down out of the back of your freezer. So that it was a really, really beautiful idea that then you step over the line. There's a little hidden line that no one ever knows, and suddenly you're thinking, well, I could, I remember doing the maths on a whiteboard of, we'll get Sainsbury's, and then we'll get Waitrose because we're premium, and then we'll do 400 stores, and we'll do 3 cases. Hey, this time next year, Del Boy, we'll be millionaires. you couldn't make it up. We looked at our turnover, and we were going to be 4.5 million turnover in 4 years.
So you almost sort of accidentally slipped from lifestyle / hobby business to back into proper big business. But before we get onto that, and we've slightly missed a bit, talk to me about the exit, because exiting a £20 million turnover business isn't simple. How did that happen? Talk me through the process.
Well, I mean, the interesting thing around it is that you at that age and at that point, I mean, I never set up Logistik as a business that I wanted to build and sell, and I suspect, and I can't actually prove that, but I suspect there's a different approach you take, isn't it, when you're building a lot of people build for equity, don't they? They're looking at multiples, and they're looking at exit strategies in 5 years, and I'll triple my money and all this sort of stuff. That's not how we were looking at this business in the early days. So the selling of it was quite, I think, quite clunky in some respects. It wasn't done with a lot of thought, although, we did have good advisors around us. There was a bit of friction internally with my shareholders at the time, which, another lesson learned for me is, be careful who your shareholders is. I fell out over it with my, one of my my best friend. It's
Let me just interrupt you there because, okay, just describe the what the equity looked like at this point. So you had, how many shareholders did you have, and how much did you still own? And
4 shareholders,
yep,
including myself.
yep,
Having whereas there was an EMI scheme out as well that needed to be considered for someone who was critically important to that business. I had majority stake, or the most significant stake at that time, and well, yeah, I didn't plan to sell it. Ironically, at that time, I switched at the last minute from trying to buy them out and doing it in a different way to actually, I just want to get out of this. And I sold. I sort of they started negotiating me with a price upwards, saying this is how much I want. And then at the last minute, I said, "Oh, great, I'll take that. You buy me." And that wasn't planned. That was just luck, I think. So I don't take credit for that, but I did all right,
So your share, you didn't sell to a third party. You sold back to the shareholders.
It was a management buyout.
Right. Okay. And without discussing numbers, what did the structure of that look like? Was there an earnout? Was there a non-compete?
No, it was literally. It was the only sort of restriction was it was a payment over a period.
Right.
So there was an initial chunk of cash paid, and then it was paid over a period of, I think, 18 months.
Okay.
To allow them to finance it. So
yeah,
and I think I had attached to it some consultancy work for a few months and some bits and pieces. So things. So
I always ask when I talk to guests about exits, I always ask about the structure because people who haven't sold businesses before have a tendency to just look at the money. So, oh my God, I'm going to get £1 million, £5 million, whatever it might be.
Yeah.
But actually, structures are sometimes more important than the actual value.
I would agree.
So the fact that you got cash in 18 months is, when I sold my business, we were extraordinarily lucky. We got all our cash in 90 days, which is very, very odd. But for you to get 18 months, I think that's an interesting one for listeners who are potentially selling or thinking about selling, just to bear in mind. But you had no earnout, no numbers, anything like that. It was just a cash flow thing rather than a thing. Okay. We've jumped ahead slightly, but before we do, I want to talk to our listeners about the Leeds Business Podcast Fair Deal. The Leeds Business Podcast Fair Deal has 2 sides to it. My side of it is every week, free of charge, I bring you inspirational, motivational, and fascinating guests like Dirk, totally free of charge. All you have to do, listener and viewer, is one thing. Recommend this podcast to one other person you feel will get benefit from it. That's all you have to do. That's your side of the deal. And that's the Leeds Business Podcast Fair Deal. Does that sound like a fair deal, Dirk?
Sounds like a fair deal to me.
Okay, so let's go back to the ice cream story. So you've exited Logistik. You've bought an ice cream van. In your mind, initially, it's a lifestyle business. It'd be a bit of fun. And then suddenly, we've got a whiteboard in front of us with things like M&S, Waitrose, Asda, and £4 million turnover in front of us.
Yeah, I know. How silly was that? Although, yeah, I mean, it just happens, doesn't it? Because if you believe a product in your product, you just can't help yourself because you want to share it with everybody. Do you know what I mean? Yeah. It was, is, and will continue to be a great premium ice cream product. With lots of innovation around it.
So you went from, in theory, just buying third-party ice cream to sell out of a van. You then got involved with Josh, who started creating flavors and stuff like that.
Out of 15 liters at a time.
Okay, so ice cream. You think of, I don't know, some very, very big players.
Yep.
Did you not? At what point did you think, hang on a minute, we're taking on the Walls of this world, and I can't think of any other ice cream brands, but the big boys.
Walls, those are the two biggest players. General Mills with Ben and Jerry's. No, sorry, that's Unilever. Ben and Jerry's. General Mill have Haagen-Dazs.
But so you've decided out of your 1960s van that you're going to take these guys on.
Well, I think the market is big. I mean, the market is, a 3.2 billion quid market, ice cream. So all in our heads, all we wanted was a percent, a couple of percent in the long term. So we were never looking at taking these guys down or challenging them. What we were looking at is producing a disruptor brand, which was artisan, and it made ice cream center plate. That was what and there was enough in that to get to great restaurants, to high-end cafes and places of gathering where people have, those sort of things, and take it more into the realms of what Europe sees ice cream as. I mean, the chef that we used to have who came after Josh was a guy called Manolo. He had a shop in the north of Italy, and it was turning over 1.6 million quid. And the shop was no bigger than, it was less than 400 square feet. And it's the quality of what he was producing. And he had queues, he had, 50-foot queue for people. And he was paying 15 quid for a litre of ice cream, 15 euros for a litre of ice cream. So that was the thinking around it. It wasn't so much to, take on, you're never going to take those guys on because they're far too big. Although we are, playing with them now. We're doing some projects which are affecting some of the bigger players.
So the original route was to go B2B to C rather than B2C.
Yes, I mean that was always the case. I think we started off with the van, then we thought. I mean, actually, there is a very interesting transition there. That we started off from van to customer. Then we decided let's get in the supermarkets, which we then very quickly realised is not the route because it's a hugely tough, expensive. I'm not sure I wouldn't recommend that to anyone anymore who's trying to start up a small independent brand. I think the supermarkets are the only ones who benefit. No one else benefits. But we then went to food service wholesalers, then to the market. And that for us was a sensible move because if you look, you've only got 4 or 5 big players of supermarkets, but you've got probably 150 distributors ranging from Bid Food breaks down to, the local ones around here, FCN, Miller's, they're all, there are some good wholesalers there. And I think if you can, the idea was if we get the wholesalers along the Pennine sort of corridor, from Hull to Liverpool for start and then grow from there.
Okay. So it's all via
distributors.
Wholesalers, yeah. Right, okay.
We don't do any retail.
So you're selling to them and then they're selling to, like you mentioned, the cafes and the restaurants and people like that. So do you have any control who they sell your product to? Or is that?
And the way we can control it is that we don't have difference in pricing. Everybody gets a flat price, which helps. So, if you're going to cut your throat and give it away, you're cutting your throat and giving away. There is no incentive from us to do that because we wanted to stay premium. And that's where the difference is. We're not about rolling hills and wet-nosed cows and saving the world scoop by scoop. We're experts in ice cream. And what we do is produce a premium product that, people will pay for and people do pay for. I mean, it's not extraordinary. There is a ceiling with everything, but we're not the cheap end of the market. Definitely not.
Yeah. Just on, and I never went into this sort of product wholesale thing. You sell it into the wholesaler, big bucks. And then what's the incentive for them to really put some effort behind shifting it to their buyers? Or is it just, they need to get rid of it? It's
a little bit more complicated than I made out. We have our own sales team. So the way to get a wholesaler is to create a market for them. So basically we went to the cafes and we would sell directly to cafes and restaurants, but we wouldn't distribute to them. We would give them, the product. We would tell them the list price. And then we would go to the wholesaler and say, look, we've got a customer for you. They want to buy our product. Will you list our product so we can supply them? And that's how we did it. And it works really well. It is a really good way of getting growing your customer base, because at the end of the day, there is one of our competitors, Marshfield. They have wheels on the ground. They've got 26 vans or something ridiculous that are doing deliveries. That's really expensive. And Chill Chain frozen chill chain is just really expensive. So it's much better to do it through a distributor.
Okay. So just give us a flavour. Sorry, excuse the pun. Give us a flavour of the size of the business now.
We're currently when we started, we were doing I think we were doing like 500 grand for the first 2-3 years a year. We're now, I think this year we'll do 10 million.
Wow.
8 to 10 million. I think we're probably more in the 10 million. We're tendering some big work at the moment that I think is, it's not a deal until the ink's dried, but I would argue it would be unlikely to fail. And the target over the next 3 to 5 is 17 million turnover. We've gone from doing 15 litres in the little 1,000 square foot unit we're now doing 200,000 litres a week. We've got 2 shifts. We've got 3 lines, 2 shifts. We're just investigating spending into a spiral freezer, another £1 million worth of investment. So it's, the brand is grown significantly.
Yeah. Again, we talked financial structure and logistics. I assume you've had external finance and investment.
I mean, there's a story to it. We are now owned by Bidfood.
Oh, okay. How did that come about then?
So up until about 2020, that famous year, we were doing fantastically. We'd managed to secure investment from a VC fund, Mobius, who's now owned by Gresham, and who are now owned by somewhere else now. And it was we were well on target. People were loving the product. We were getting the traction with our wholesalers. And we'd done a deal with Gresham for an investment of 2.5 million, which would have rocketed us to it. Then obviously March 23rd, 2020 occurred, and the arse end of the world dropped out. And that sort of then put us into a really sort of crazy sort of situation where, what do you do? What was interesting at that time is having been in business for some time, seen recessions. It's interesting how resilience wasn't on the top of a lot of people's lists. So we then had to decide what we're going to do. We went from doing 200,000, I suppose, in a quarter to £2,000 in a quarter. We had to turn the actual. I was talking about, this is our strategy. We were going through distributors. We then now needed to turn it around and go to supermarkets. And to survive. So we were doing Co-op's own brand. We were doing, we did a theatre tub. There was just so much moving around that we had to do, and it was incredibly expensive to do it and incredibly stressful. And then, we in 2020, it was just a nightmare. So then from there on, it was just hand to mouth, really. We took the bounce back loans. We weren't entitled to any of the other loans, but we had investors, so we were getting deep into our investors, not the institutional ones. So we raised more money with them, which then killed the equity for me and for Josh and all the other. So then over time it just didn't get any better. Then who knew the Suez Canal post that it was the catalyst for a list of things that then ended up happening, particularly in manufacturing, container supply, ingredient supply. Then you had utilities go off, and, it was just an absolute, it all came together all at once. And then we managed to get through that, ironically, and we got some more funding from the same people, but it was definitely not on the same terms. Things were much tighter, much different, much smaller. Probably half the amount of money, and some of it was loan notes for 12 months and interest had to be paid. So, but we kept on going. And then it got to a point over the years, we kept on trying to go forward and it was doing well. We weren't getting traction, but not quick enough. The decision had to come. So what do you do? I had a very difficult conversation with the individual investors. to say basically, I don't think this is the right. They were keen to invest more, and I said I don't think that's the right answer, because if you looked at the marketplace at the time, there was a lot of consolidation going on. So people like Bidfood, people like Breaks were buying, and Kitwave, which is another one of them, were buying a lot of the wholesalers. And before you know it, if we're outside of that 10, it's going to be very difficult. So I said, look, that discussion went on for a little bit, and they were keen to put more money in. I was fighting, and in the end, we had a massive row with the chair. It was a shame that got to that, but I think it was the right decision, because we just needed someone like Bidfood, who had the distribution, who had the deep pockets to allow us to grow, because we knew what the product we were doing, the strategy was right. It was just that we were running out of cash, and I think that was symptomatic for a lot of businesses since COVID, that you take on all this debt and stuff, and you can't survive. And then you sort of starting to think to yourself, well, what's the point of this? Do you know what I mean? And the stress got that high that we're all turning grey and aging years in very short time. So the decision was made to sell to Bidfood, and it was a great decision. It's a great decision, hard decision, because it's very emotional for Josh and myself, but it was the right decision, and it's a great decision.
So what I'm understanding is it was a cash flow problem. So I assume the money was coming in, the profitability was coming in. It was just servicing debt,
and also there wasn't to service the customers. You had the volume has to be there, and to get the volume, it's all about a volume game, isn't it? You want to keep the quality and you want to get the volume up, and those two things aren't great bed partners a lot of the time. So the only way, you just need to get more volume, and to do more volume, you have to buy more. To buy more, you need more cash. Your credit ratings on the floor, you're not getting credit. It's just impossible to trade. Now we've got a situation where we can, chocolate's gone up at the moment from £3.60 a kilo to nigh on £16 a kilo. We're putting orders in to hold contracts worth, 100,000 quid's worth of chocolate, for a period of time. We didn't have the ability to do that. Right. So it was really important.
So how do you, you're very entrepreneurial. How are you feeling at the moment being a cog in a big corporate?
I think it couldn't have happened with a better company. I think, I have to give them credit. They've been very supportive. They're good people. I don't agree with everything, but and I think they try hard to look after people. But they are also listed in South Africa, and they've got shareholders and all sorts of things. So for me, it's been an interesting learning. I've never had a boss. So I report to someone now, and I have to ask for holiday, and I have to ask for my expenses to be signed off, which is an unusual concept.
This is why we start our own businesses, because we don't like these sort of things.
The thing is, I'm still involved in other things. So, they've given me the flexibility. I'm on a 3-day a week sort of term at the moment. There's no restrictions. I can leave whenever I want. I'm enjoying it to some extent. But I'm finding it frustrating. And I suppose what this has given me is an insight into why big businesses don't do as well as they could. Because I think there's things that they just miss, because people get into this whole backside covering, this whole, this scenarios where they're emailing, there's meetings for meetings' sake. Everybody, I'm having to have meetings about just so you know that we can't call people love anymore. Yeah. And I'm like, yeah, really? Is that you're having to tell me that? Do you know what I mean? We're in a new world. I get it. It's just interesting. It's been a journey. I'm learning from it. I'm learning insights, which at some point will benefit me. And I've always said I've got another project in me. I just don't know what it is yet. I'm holding my flight pattern. I'm doing a circle pattern at the moment,
Right.
just to
Okay.
see what I'm going to do next.
Yeah. It's always fascinating talking to exited founders who end up, sometimes they've got to do 2 years and
Yeah.
all those things like meetings and reports and arse covering and all the things. The reason they started the business in the first place is back again. It's back again. So before we finish, Dirk, every week we ask our guests to give us a how-to, and I don't know what your how-to is going to be. So over to you.
Wow, that's an interesting. So we touched on areas of it, and it's how to fail quickly. And I know that sounds pessimistic, but it doesn't, because I believe when you're owners, entrepreneurs, I don't think we're ever short of ideas, and we're never short of opportunities. But and the flip side of that is we're never short of emotional passion, drive, determination, willingness to do the hard work. And I think, for me, understanding listening to your gut more, is a really important thing. And I think sometimes we let our passion override our gut, and our heart leads the gut, and that isn't what I think. Because if I look at 2 or 3, I've had probably 6 or 7 different businesses and operate some still. And the businesses where even in the ice cream, I think the thing that you can't get back is time. Yeah, that's money you can get, learning you can get. Time there's a limit to it, and you can't sort of go, oh well, I'll do that again because now I know what I'm doing. I've done a rehearsal. So, in fact, when you're spending all your time and passion, knowing that something isn't going to succeed, deep down your gut's saying, it ain't going to work. But you then continue to grow, and you continue to go at it, and you punch the way through it. And in the idea of the ice cream is a good example. Now, what I should have done is stopped at 2021 and said, right, writing's on the wall. I can see this. This is just going to be a slog on. That everybody wants a piece of the equity. It's not going to work. But I didn't. So I pushed on because we've started it. We're going to do it. At that point, you should think, because I could have saved myself 5 years, lost a load of money, which I still lost during the deal because fundamentally there wasn't anywhere to go with it. It was a distressed sale. And I could have been doing something else to earn that money back. So for me, I think it's around making sure, and Mark Roberts, who just released a book, and I contributed a little bit to that, and he said something which I thought was really interesting, how he operates. And that was, he voice records things, and then lets them sit and doesn't look at them for 2 weeks, and then goes back to them and then says, right, is that the right thing to do? You can't do that all the time, but I think that's a brilliant sort of way of looking at things. So you don't jump into things hot-headed and think, yeah, I can do this, take over the world. Ice cream was the second over-traded thing next to confectionery, and it was madness trying to take an ice cream company. But look where we are now. I had to sell and all that, but the brand I'm proud of, it's national. It's everywhere. Do you know what I mean? So we did it, but was it worth it? Do you know what I mean? It's too late now to reflect on it, but if I'd had my time again, would I do the same thing? Probably not.
Yeah, it's that sliding doors concept, isn't it?
Yeah, it's just you need to, and a lot of us just, because we've always got opportunities. There's always something new. There's another shiny thing. That's guaranteed. Time though, I'm 57 this year. What could I have done in that time that I've lost, that I'll never get back, which was really stressful. But I've got great learning of it. The learnings I got from that were phenomenal.
Yeah. Okay, that's some great advice there, Dirk. If it's not, it's the old, if you're getting in a hole, sometimes you just have to stop digging and go.
Stop digging. Fear of failure. It's not failure. It's being big enough to say, actually, this is not worth it. Do you know what I mean? Because your family suffer, your health suffers, your mental health suffers, all of those things.
Yeah. Couple of things you said there. You mentioned Mark Robertson, his book. I interviewed Mark a couple of weeks ago, so there will be a link in the show notes to Mark's episode, and also the idea that Mark has about recording stuff. I do it the old school way, so I write things down,
brilliant,
and then put it in a drawer, and then take it out a week later, and it's almost like you're reviewing somebody else's work. It takes the emotion out of it, and it makes you see the common sense and go, actually, that's a really crap idea.
Well, Phil, I wish you had told me how to do that a few years back. Life would have been a lot simpler.
Okay, now, one last thing, Dirk. We ask all our guests to give another Leeds business a shout out. So who are you going to give a shout out to?
Well, he's just someone I think is fantastic as a designer. So he's just gone out on his own. He's a commercial designer and an artist, and his work's brilliant. And he's a guy called Jim Fox. And his website's jim.fox.com. And he's really, the way he approaches his work is really good. He works with the client really well. We've used him for Northern Bloc designs through a company, and now he's gone on his own, but he's also a great sort of artist. So I think I hope he said he's going to give it a go and see how long he goes with it. And I really wish him all the success, because he's a really good, genuine person, and he's not arrogant and trying to change the world. He just wants to do good work.
Okay, great stuff. And the URL you just mentioned will also be in the show notes below this episode. Dirk, it's been absolutely fantastic. Thank you ever so much for being a guest on the show.
Phil, thank you very much for having me.
I hope that you enjoyed this episode. Make sure you hit the follow button so every new episode gets sent straight to your phone.